Hi, this is Lisa Bedford, the Survival Mom, and I have for you today a video book review of a book I discovered quite by accident, and I purchased it on Kindle. It is a book called Land by Theresa Shaver, and I purchased the Kindle version. I was actually traveling home from a speaking engagement. I needed a quick read, and this one fit the bill perfectly. It's not overly long. Sometimes with my schedule, I just don't have time to sit down to, a 500-page book or, something by Stephen King. And so this one was just perfect. I was a little concerned because the book features teenagers. And when you get to be my age, you really don't want to read about teenager angst and romance and, I think he glanced at me. I ended up rolling my eyes in a few parts of the book. But overall, I really liked this book. And I think the author, Theresa Shaver, did a really good job of, first of all, introducing all of the characters to us, and then progressing the story in a way in which I learned a few survival prepper type tips and brought the book to a satisfying and yet not quite finished conclusion. The story opens with a group of high school students from Canada, and they are at a school field trip down in Disneyland near Los Angeles. And if you've been to Disneyland, you know that the happiest place on earth could end up being the most miserable place on earth in a off-grid situation, and that's exactly what happened. First of all, I want to give kudos to Theresa Shaver, the author, for having the big apocalyptic event happen right away in the book. All too often when I read one of these apocalyptic novels, whether it's, some big Yellowstone caldera explosion, or if it's an incredibly big earthquake like Deep Winter, or an EMP, which seems to be the crisis du jour among a lot of authors, but you have to wait and wait and wait for the big event to happen. And in this book, Land, bam! The EMP happens within the first couple of pages, and I loved it because I wasn't on tenterhooks just waiting and waiting and waiting. Okay, I know this is going to happen. Let's get it over with already and see, how the characters evolve and how they solve their problems. So I was glad for that. It really was interesting how the group in Disneyland splintered into different factions. This book focuses on a small group of teenagers who decide to get to Canada, to get back home across land. And they have a good amount of money with them, provided to them by one of their teachers, who really believes that this core group of students have the skills and the personalities and temperament needed to get home. And there's another group who decides it will be quicker to get to Canada by sea. And that is the second installation in the series. The third installation, and Ms. Shaver is actually finishing this book even as I'm recording this review. It is going to follow a third group. And this group may be the most intriguing of all. It is made up by a teacher who is very much a hardcore prepper. Back home in Canada, she has the food stored and she has everything that she needs to be self-sufficient, but she is going to stay behind in the Disneyland and California area with a group of students and parents who are convinced that the powers that be, law enforcement, rescue agencies, and so on are going to come to their aid. And I can't wait for that third installation. I think that is going to be very, very interesting. The book is satisfying in itself. The students, first of all, show a great deal of ingenuity. And they do have a large amount of money, but I found that they spent it in ways that were just very smart. One of their first stops before hitting the road is going to a sporting goods store. And I thought that was a really smart move because so much that we would need in the way of survival can be found at one of those kinds of stores. And the group, for the most part, is pretty cohesive. They come from similar backgrounds for the most part. They have been raised outdoors, they have been raised, a couple of them on a farm, and so they have a lot of those skills that are just commonly associated with survival and self-reliance. The group does eventually make it to Canada, and that alone is pretty impressive, but not before they come across quite a few challenges. Some of the challenges that they are faced with It's almost like, the author just kind of waved a magic wand and made the problem go away, pretty quickly, I think a little more easily than it would in reality. I didn't really have any nits to pick with this book. I was a little sorry in one section when they left behind a perfectly good dog. I am such an animal lover, and I was cheering for the dog. I was thinking, okay, they'll have a watchdog, they'll have someone for companion, and incredibly, they left the dog behind with a dead owner who could no longer take care of it. And one explanation that occurred to me is that 2 or 3 of these kids were farm kids. And I know that very often people who grow up on ranches and farms, maybe they don't see animals the same way that some of us city folk do, where, our animals, they're not like family members, they actually are family members. And so I can understand that, and yet I was kind of sad to see the dog left behind. The group is made of believable characters, and I found that I was interested in each one of them. I didn't find that, some of them were just like paper dolls that you never really get to know. They were all pretty much, kind of fleshed out, and by mid-story or so, you are kind of bonded with this group of kids. Yes, there is a tiny amount of teenage kind of romance where, the main character, a girl, happens to glance, at a boy and see that he's watching her furtively. And those are the parts where I just would roll my eyes and say, I'm reading this book about teenage romance. But the storyline kept me interested. In fact, it kept me so interested that I went ahead and I purchased the second volume in the series called See. SEA, and sure enough, that one followed the second group of students as they found transportation from Southern California all the way up to the Vancouver area, and then they were transported from there to their hometown. A lot of challenges along the way for both groups. I would give these 2 books probably a 4.5 out of 5 stars. No real reason to mark it down, except that I think it would be a good challenge to Theresa Shaver just to keep working and improving her writing and her character building and just her imagination. And I've been in touch with Theresa, and I actually have an upcoming interview with her maybe in the next week or 2. So be checking out the blog and checking on my Facebook page as well. So I do recommend the book See by Theresa Shaver. I think that it is priced reasonably on Kindle. I don't know what the current price is right now, but it is short enough to read in a reasonable amount of time, and yet you really feel like, that was just a good story. So this is Lisa Bedford, the Survival Mom, giving a big thumbs up to the books Land and Sea by Theresa Shaver, and I will see you the next time around.